Hi guys, Skypoint here. Now it seems that the balance patches in this game just keep getting bigger. One of the biggest ones to date. Alright, so in this video we're going to start running through all the changes. We're going to begin with changes to a couple of the Warlords and the Raven Guard. And then after that we're actually going to go on to the main event, which is the huge balance pass on the Wordbearers. Alright, let's start with Warlords, and the first Warlord who's seeing a change is Canis Vertex. So, Canis Vertex is now getting this start with one less card. It's technically a bit of a nerf, but honestly it's a pretty minor nerf. If you play against Canis Vertex, you'll know that usually for the first 1 or 2 turns, the players controlling them are going to be just using their energy to load the guns. And so in those turns, your Canis Vertex hand will just be filling up with more and more cards. So it's a nerf, but not as bad for this guy as it is for most other Warlords to start with a fewer card. Start with one less card, rather. Alright, but that is not all. So Canis Vertex has also had a change to Psyker. Originally it was Psyker 2, and now it's Psyker 1. And then the other change which has happened, which we cannot actually show you over here, is going with that they've reduced the cost of using psychic energy on his fists from 3 down to 2. What that's going to do is make it much harder for Canis Vertex to both use the fists as well as throw out shields. So you're building up your psychic energy much slower, which means you'll be able to shield yourself less, and even with the change on the fists, you're going to be using your fists to do less psychic damage. Overall, that means that the Psyker energy changes for Canis Vertex are huge and represent a very big nerf on the Titan. Why are they doing that? Well, it still had an abnormally high win rate in pretty much all of the season reports which the devs were releasing. Alright, next up is going to be Inga Thorson. So, Inga Thorson was honestly always one of the weakest Warlords in the game. They had gone through this one time when they gave her a buff and it became an absolutely crazy buff, and Inga Thorson became the most powerful Warlord in the game by far, and the devs had actually gone through a second, nerf pass and quickly changed that, and she became pretty weak again. So what they're now doing is changing Inga Thorson's energy ability to give a Mark of Chaos and then +1 health as well to a non-demon troop. That means Inga Thorson is becoming a little bit of a healing type Warlord. I'm not sure if that's going to be enough to make her truly great again or not, but it's an interesting attempt by the devs. It's a nice incremental change as opposed to being a giant change. And let's take a look at what that does for Inga Thorson. Alright, the next Warlord with a change. Well, if you've ever been on the Facebook page for Horus Heresy Legions, every time the devs posted, there was a single comment showing up every time across multiple people: buff Proctor. And so they've done that. Old Proctor used to have this ability where at the end of his turn he would give +1 attack and +1 health to a random unit on his side. They've now changed this so you give it to units which are adjacent to you, and that actually has 2 benefits. First of all, obviously, you can now buff 2 vehicles at once. But secondly, you can actually now control to a certain extent which vehicles are getting the buffs. Before, when it was a random vehicle getting it, you couldn't be sure if the guy you really needed to get buffed would have it, or if it's going to go on to a really pathetic unit which is going to die with no impact. So it's not bad. Again, it's a nice little incremental buff to Proctor. It'll be interesting to see what happens now that he can benefit 2 vehicles per turn. Alrighty, next up is actually from the Custodes, which is interesting. Let's head over to take a look at them. Where are they? They are over here. Where the least commonly played Custodes Warlord, Vetranio Shapura, has had a buff. His energy ability has changed in cost from a big 2 energy down to 1 energy. That makes his ability a lot easier to use while still building up a board presence, which actually goes well with his ability over here, which means he can put down more troops and protect them until his turn. It's an interesting change. Again, a little too soon to tell how it's going to be for sure, but I think you're definitely going to see a lot more people over this weekend playing as, well, over this rest of this week and the weekend playing as Shapura. And then the final one, and this is huge, is Cassie Vaughn of the Salamanders. Alright, so let's take a look at him. So, he has Survivor 5, and now he gains this special card, which is called the Twice Dead. So what is that? Let's go down and see. Hopefully the devs have made it show up here. Oh, yep, there it is. The Twice Dead. It's a special card. Normally costs 20 energy, but once Cassian Survivor has been triggered, you can play this. And what it does is it heals 5, so it's like a mini Reckoning. And all the current troops in your hand have their cost reduced by 2. So it's a little bit situational, because what you really need to do in order to make this work is get down to 0 health, so your survivor triggers, at a time when you have a fair number of troops of moderate but maybe not very high cost in your hand, and then you'll suddenly make them cheap and you can dump them out onto the board and hopefully win. Really what this card is trying to do is give you one more turn in order to suddenly put a army onto the board and try and win. That's very interesting. I like it. It leads to some ideas for tactical gameplay as Cassian, which is a nice change to sort of what it was like before. So it's a very different type of card. I love what the devs are doing with adding more and more of these special cards for non-Warlord, for non-Primarch Warlords. I really hope that one day every Warlord has a card like this, because that's going to add a lot of flavor to each Warlord. Alright, so that was the buffs to the Warlords. Let's talk a little bit about a few nerfs to the Raven Guard, because they were getting kind of out of control. The most important one is to one of the cards which was buffed a couple weeks back, Martyr Squad. So Martyr Squad is getting a very slight nerf. Its base attack value is getting reduced, and its base health is getting reduced down to 3 energy, where it actually becomes quite easy to kill with a lot of various tactics and things which people have. So that's going to make these guys easier to kill after they're on the board, but they still have their really strong rally ability, where as soon as they hit the board they're giving sentence to an enemy and damaging it at once, which obviously has a lot of synergy with other Raven Guard cards and abilities. So it's still a very strong card, just dialed back a little bit in power, and I think that's a good place. And the last one which got nerfed was, where's it gone here? Ambrose Akundrus. So, Ambrose Akundrus used to be a 5 energy card which dealt 2 damage, and the next Raven Guard troop you played gained fast. And that was then used often as a finisher to hit the enemy Warlord and kill them quickly. So they've nerfed that. You no longer get fast, you get flank. So you can use Ambrose Akundrus to kill enemy units, except for the Warlord. Well, with the unit which gets put in play. Now, to sort of compensate for that a little bit, they've increased the base damage. So now it does 3 points of damage instead of 2 points. But it's still overall a huge nerf, because it means that Ambrose Akundrus is not part of a Raven Guard finisher combo anymore. I think that's going to really hit the usage of Raven Guard decks quite a fair bit, but that's needed because they were getting very, very powerful after the last balance patch. Alright, and with that we get on to the main event, the changes to the Wordbearers, and there are so many of these. Alright, I'm going to start off with Torgul Squad, the never ever played unit. So let's take a look at these guys. And they still have their original thing, which was give +1 attack to your infantry troops. But check this out. That backlash ability. When they die, you put in place a Cygnus Acolyte. So that was the most basic of the new Cygnus Cultists, which came in from the Wordbearer troop. In the latest expansion. And I love what they're doing with this, because they're giving the Wordbearers a bit more synergy with Chaos Cults, which is fantastic and fits the lore very well. And it's a nice little power boost for these guys as well. So this is great, because if you already have infantry in play, these guys will help them, and if you don't have infantry, it'll create infantry. So that's part one of the changes, and you're going to see a lot of these things coming up. Number 2, Dagadol Bikes. So this was actually interesting. There wasn't a lot of anti-stealth hate on the Wordbearers, and they've added a powerful ability to Dagadol Bikes, which is it makes a random enemy with stealth lose it. That means all of a sudden these have become incredibly worthwhile cards. Because if you're facing someone with stealth, they're going to help fight it. And if you're facing someone without stealth, they're a very useful, fast attacking unit. So I think that even though these are a common rarity card, they have become much, much more valuable, and you're going to see these working their way into a lot more Wordbearer decks. Next up is Garland Squad. So Garland Squad before used to be that if you put them in play and you had another infantry, they would kill that infantry and gain Demon Host twice. Let's take a look at them now. This has changed completely. Now when you put them in play, you get to add a Wounded Zealot. So Wounded Zealots being the weakest of the Chaos Infantry, free unit, 1 attack, 1 health. But, and there's a nice little but here, you probably saw it earlier, they now have Relentless. Every time they start the turn with friendly infantry, they will gain Demon Host twice. So that means they can potentially start becoming very powerful. And you're going to see Wordbearer players starting to really shift to having a lot more infantry in their mix in order to start taking advantage of more and more of these synergies, which we're going to see, well, more of coming up in a moment. Alright, next up is Torgul Squad. Where have they gone over here? So before they used to have Battle Honor, which was gain Demon Host when they kill an enemy unit. Unfortunately for them, by the time they killed an enemy unit, they would very often be close to dying and just would get wiped out. So now they've gained a very handy ability over here. They heal 2 when they kill a unit. That means you can use these guys to reap the weak units on the board, and they're going to start recovering health from that and remaining powerful, and of course gaining Demon Host and potentially gaining Demon Host repeatedly if there are lots of weak units for them to kill turn after turn and stay alive. Very powerful. Next up is a fantastic. Ashen Circle was already one of my favorite Wordbearer cards. And what it's doing now is it's getting a big buff. It's gaining 5 attack instead of 4 attack, and it retains everything else. Meaning you can potentially deal 7 damage with these guys in 1 turn instead of 5 damage. And that's just to a single unit, not even considering the splash effect. This is just a straight up buff to an already great unit. And of course, remember, as I kept talking about the synergies with infantry, more and more of those are coming in here. So I cannot stress enough how much I like it. They're making the Wordbearers the Chaos Cult and Space Marine faction, which is exactly what they should have always been. Alright, we still have a couple more changes. Not just a couple, a lot of changes. Next up is Karthus, the legendary troop. Now this was actually interesting. Karthus used to have this sacrifice ability, which is that if he dies while attacking, you get to put in play a greater demon. He still has that, but now he also gains a cool rally ability, because his biggest problem before was everyone knew how dangerous he was, so they would kill him as soon as he hit the board. Now, if you have a friendly infantry out there to soak up a hit, Karthus can kill that friendly infantry to gain Survivor 2 as he goes into play. Now you start to see synergies, because Torgul Squad for 1 energy goes in play, dies, and creates a Cygnus Acolyte. Then, Karthus can be used to kill that infantry which got created over there. Alright, so that's already looking really, really fantastic. And in fact, we're going to see more and more of these things coming up in a moment. Alright, next up, Garland Squad. Very, very uncommonly used before, but now very useful because check this out. They have the sacrifice ability, put in play 2 random 2-cost cultists whenever they die. So again, this will create troops which will help feed other abilities like Garland Squad or Karthus said. More and more synergy just being created here. That's fantastic. Next up is Gallic Squad. Where's Galland Squad gone? They were a neat little... I know, here they are, 4 energy. Alright, so these guys were always pretty cool. They had 5 attack, 3 health, and sneak attack, but they were vulnerable to getting wiped out with tactics very quickly. Now, again, if you've been building up your infantry on the board, Gallic Squad can kill an infantry of your own as they go into play, but then gain ward and be able to avoid getting deleted straight up by tactics, which allows them to use their abilities more effectively. Very interesting change there. I'm liking that too. Right, next up, Barger heavy support. So Barger heavy support were always interesting. Decent stats, and they were just doing area damage. I think it was 4 damage to the target and 2 damage to things on either side, if I'm not wrong. Now they've changed this, so you still deal 4 damage for 2 energy, but if you kill your target, they gain Demon Host. And of course, that means that these guys can then shoot again next turn and next turn. And if your Demon Host is giving you abilities which keep you alive, well, these guys can start becoming more and more and more dangerous, which is very exciting. Again, an uncommonly used card before, but an excellent ability like this means that they're starting to really deserve a place in decks. Next up, we have Possessed Marine. Now, this was already a really good card. So, it had Ward and it had Cleave 2. This is then getting a little bit of a nerf, actually, because now when you put them in play, they gain Demon Host. So they're not necessarily getting Ward. They might still get it, but they might get something else instead. And I think that's fair. This was already one of the most powerful cards the Wordbearers had, and it was probably a little bit out of calibration, I guess, with the 6 energy cards from most other factions. So a very, very minor nerf to these guys. Still an excellent card. Next up, Dark Martyr. So, this is a straight up buff. Dark Martyr before used to have 6 attack, 7 health. And then they had the great rally and relentless ability of gaining Demon Host. They're just that little bit more dangerous now. They go and play with 7 health. Great card before, even better card now. Captain Apostle is pretty much the same story. They're unchanged. He just has that little bit more health now, up from 7 health to 8 health. Again, a fantastic buffing unit for your other Space Marines. I just think that with the greater emphasis on Wordbearers for having more infantry in their deck, it's going to be hard for Captain Apostle to find his space in there. But, you know, maybe I'm wrong. Alright, next up is Kaleem of the Anunnaki. So, very much unchanged, except its rally ability has been improved. It used to be gain 2 attack for your front line. So if you kill a friendly infantry, you become 9 attack, 9 health. Honestly, he wasn't that heavily used before. But again, now that the Wordbearers are probably going to start throwing in a lot more infantry cards, you probably want to use him, and he's got a very useful buff. As well as gaining +2 attack, he now gains +2 health, meaning that if you kill a unit with him while putting him in play, he becomes a 9 attack and a whopping 11 health unit. Very powerful. Straight up buffs also apply to Sor Talgron. He used to be 7 attack, 7 health. He's now 8 attack, 8 health. He still has his front line. He still has his fantastic rally ability. He falls into that bucket again of great card before, even better now. Next up, changes to a few tactics for the Wordbearers. We're going to begin with Heralds of the Truth over here. Heralds of the Truth has received a buff. Before it used to be 2 energy and you just gain this sacrifice ability for all your troops. Now it's 2 energy and draw a card. Makes it much easier to play, as I've stressed so many times in this video, in various videos. Drawing a card on its own is worth 2 energy. So gaining 2 energy and giving sacrifice to your troops, yeah, very, very useful. Next up, Fanatical Zeal. This was the healing card, and they've done something interesting with this. Its healing ability is completely unchanged, but if your Warlord is on his own, you also gain a free troop. Again, that makes this card really good, because it was already great, and now it means that if you, as well as healing, you can potentially be adding to your board presence. Love it. I love it absolutely. And the final card is again one of the very uncommonly used ones, Raising of Monarchia. This would ordinarily be a great card, except it kind of felt like a bit of a dead turn, because you're dumping a ton of energy into buffing your future troops, not even the ones in your hand. Now it's like an expensive card draw. Spend 4 energy, draw a card, and buff the troops in your deck. So again, card draws being worth about 2 energy, this becomes more justifiable. I just feel that, again, with the emphasis on infantry troops for the Wordbearers now, you probably aren't going to have a ton of Astartes hanging out in your deck to get buffed by this. But who knows, maybe you're still planning on going with a Space Marine heavy deck for the Wordbearers, in which case, Raising of Monarchia can become a very useful card to have there. Alright, so that's all of the changes. What do you guys think? Well, I'll tell you what I think. The Wordbearers just got a lot more interesting. Unfortunately, that means I think I have to throw out pretty much every single one of my Wordbearers decks and start from scratch. These changes, and especially the switch to greater and greater synergy between infantry and Astartes, means that your general approach for Wordbearers is going to have to be rebooted, and there'll be a lot of experimentation going on now on trying to figure out what the best decks to use for them are. Anyway, I hope you guys found this useful I hope you guys found this video useful. Stay tuned. I know I've been taking a little bit of a break. I've been having some big home improvement projects going on, but I'm done with those pretty much. And yeah, I'm going to be spending a lot more time back on Horus Heresy Legions and making videos for YouTube. Alright, so until my next video, bye for now everyone.